It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And if you work for Microsoft, you'd know exactly the times I'm talking about. The 1990s, we were on top of the world. We were untouchable. No one could compete with us. Until someone did. Along came a storyteller, Steve Jobs, who basically sold the world something it already had. We had Windows CE, we had BlackBerry, we had Palm Pilots. We already carried these things around. They did the same thing the iPhone did. They sent texts, they made calls, they ran apps, they played music. How did he manage to not only trump all of those products, but do it in a way that literally changed the world? He did it with the power of story. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. The art of storytelling. Because I don't care how good you think your idea is. In fact, I don't even care how good your idea actually is. If you can't convince someone else it's a good idea, it dies on the vine. Your idea is that proverbial tree falling in an unwatched forest. No one is around to hear it. Today, I'm going to teach you how to be heard. Are you all ready to make some noise with your lives and your ideas? You can only do it with the power of story, because story is so much more powerful than information. Story, you understand, and Steve Jobs understood this, allows your idea to be relatable, allows your audience to become not just a receptacle of information, but to see their own potential in the characters of the story that you tell. Nothing else does this except the power of the story. Story makes your idea personal, right? Steve Jobs made people feel like human beings. That's why we bought into his vision. And if you can make your audience feel more human, guess what? They're going to appreciate that. They're going to like you. And once your audience becomes to the point where they like you, your job is most of the way done. And finally, stories make concepts real. It's not just this product in the abstract. It's this product that you can see in your everyday life. And when people can see it as part of their lives, they want it. So let's get started. It turned out that I got introduced to this power of story at a very young age. In fact, I was a junior in high school, 16, 17, I don't remember. In fact, I don't even like to remember. And I remember it clearly because the event clearly because it became such a story for my life. It was a creative writing class. And the teacher came in one day. He was also the debate coach for my high school. And he said, okay, creative writers, my debate team needs practice. We basically need people to argue against us so we can prepare for the statewide competition. So I need 5 volunteers to debate against my 5 debaters. And of course, being a good C student that I was, extra credit sounded pretty good. I'll volunteer. And so there we stood, the 5 volunteers in line, and we had to go up and draw names from of all to see who we got as competition. I drew John Sapienza. John Sapienza, a senior, valedictorian, president of the senior class, and leader of the debate team. There was not a single person I could have chosen out of that bowl that would have been more disastrous. You could hear the class. As soon as I held up the name, ooh, the air went out. John walks up confidently, and he picks from another bowl for our subject. He picks the legalization of marijuana. Now it's my turn. There's only 2 things in the last bowl, pro and con. And I'm thinking, con, con, con. Look, this is a red state in the 80s. This is a completely untenable position. Guess what I picked? Pro! Are you kidding me? I have to argue the legalization of marijuana against the smartest kid in the entire state? And there we were, debate day, and there he was with a big smile on his face because he knew he was going to win, taunting me all week long. Oh, James, let's see. Will it be ethos, pathos, or logos that I use take you down and humiliate you. And I'm like, I don't even know what those words mean. But I started researching the subject, very carefully researching the subject. And I found stories, a couple of interesting stories. I got into my research. I started studying the burgeoning field of medicinal marijuana. I found a story in there. I started looking at the American Indian use of peyote and other drugs in their spiritual rituals. And I found some stories in there. I might have even smoked a big fat one myself. I might have done that. And so there we were. He drew first, and he got to lead it. This is a Catholic school, all-boy Catholic school. The teacher is a priest, and he started off strong, man, quoting politicians and priests about the evil of this drug. I knew I was going to lose. So I wanted to make my story really stick. I wanted to at least score a point in this debate. So I told a story about a cancer patient, a single mother with a special needs child who just got diagnosed with cancer. And the only way she could treat her pain, treat her nausea from the cancer treatment, in order to raise her child, was to smoke marijuana. My audience was just as quiet as you are now. I knew I was getting through. Power of story was beginning to take hold. He was next, and he started citing crime and incarceration statistics, how the evil of this drug was filling our prisons and costing us all this money to incarcerate these prisoners. Oh, John, thank you for that one. You teed up my next story perfectly, because my next story was about a black man in inner city Louisville, Kentucky, who was arrested with the possession of less than 1 gram of marijuana, thrown in jail for 8 years, his entire extended family into poverty because he was the only breadwinner in the entire family. Once again, my audience was as quiet as you are now. I knew I was getting through. And then it was John's turn one last time, and he started cataloging legislative record, and something interesting happened. Something special happened. All of a sudden, the audience, one person started it, and then more people started. Come on, join in with me. Come on, join in with me. They were shouting him down. They wanted me again. I was winning this debate. He was done. His third point canceled out. One more story, they said, James, one more story, and I didn't have another story. That was all I had. I was done. But I understood the power of story. And so I made one last one up on the spot. I figure if John can throw priests at them, I'm going to one-up him. So I told about a fantasy I had of doing a bong hit with Jesus. That's it. Game, set, match. It was over. They called me Peyote Jim for the next 1.5 years at that school, and I made myself famous. I won a debate against the best debater in the state. Now it was me with the big smile on my face, and he avoided me for the rest of the year. So what is this power of story? You see, the stories that I told convinced my audience to reevaluate what they thought about the world. I got them to reposition their mind. All of a sudden, they questioned their view of the world. Wait a minute, maybe all these assumptions I've made about right and wrong need to be reevaluated. If you can do that, you have gotten inside the head of your audience and you've made them think. And when they think, they feel human. It's not just a barrage of information, a barrage of statistics and data. They're feeling like human beings, doing what human beings are wired to do, think. And then the other bottom line here is to enjoy the preparation. Because I tell you what, the one thing Steve Jobs did, more than being on the stage, he enjoyed preparing for that stage. And if you enjoy the process of building up your story, of thinking really hard about your audience and how you can get through them, instead of thinking about, oh, how good I'm going to look up here, and how famous I'm going to be, and how many Twitter followers I'm going to collect. I don't know, just in case, maybe, you know, there I am. if the preparation is important to you, you're going to slay the presentation. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell a story and I'm going to teach lessons. I'm going to tell a story and I'm going to teach lessons. I took a storytelling class one time from somebody who told me how to tell a story without ever telling a story. I cry foul. You're going to teach storytelling, you should do it with story. My next story is about Bill Gates. The year was 1997. I was a professor in Florida, and he was the richest man in the world. He still is the richest man in the world. I'm no longer a professor in Florida. But I had an appointment with him. 1997. There it was, right on my calendar. One-on-one, James and Bill. The problem is, he didn't have the same appointment on his calendar. You see, I had decided I was going to waylay this gentleman and meet him. Right? Would you mind playing the role of Bill Gates? You don't have to do anything except sit there. You're comfortable with this? Okay. So I was at a conference, and he was speaking. It was an academic conference, and I got front row seat, right? There's Bill. There's the podium. That's where he's going to stand. There's the door. There's no way he can exit without going this way. And when he does, I'm going to jump up on stage, shake his hand, and maybe pick his pocket. I don't know. Oh, I was nervous. I was there on the front row. I was nervous the whole time. There he is. He's talking. Everybody is just, couldn't wait. And there he is. Everybody's clapping. I'm like, is it time? Is it time? He takes a question. He takes another question. Thanks the audience. Begins to walk away. And on stage I go. The problem is I wasn't the only one that had an appointment with Bill Gates. There were 3 or 4 people in front of me. They all jumped up on stage. And I'm in line this far away. I'm so close. And then it got worse. First person shakes Bill's hand, introduces himself. I'm from Cornell University. I'm like, oh, man. I'm from Florida Tech. And he's like, I do computer visualization. And I'm like, oh, man, he does something cool. I test software. And then the next person was from some equally good school that wouldn't admit me, doing something equally cool. And then the next one's doing something equally cool. And I'm just getting smaller and smaller as I approach Bill Gates. But then I saw something in Bill's eye that gave me hope. I saw boredom, complete disassociation with all of these important, interesting people who couldn't represent themselves as interesting people. And I began to get a little bit confident. And so I walked up, and Bill extended his hand, and I shook it, and I gave it just a little squeeze to let him know, Bill, this is going to be different than that stuff you just got. And I looked him right in the eye, and I said, I test software, Mr. Gates, because a broken computer on every desk and in every home is no contribution to humanity, sir. Just like that. What did I do? That's his story, a computer on every desk and in every home. I infiltrated his own story. And a funny thing happened. He didn't let go of my hand. Still cool with being Bill? Okay. He didn't let go of my hand. Now it's his turn to ask questions. I'll never forget the question he asked. He looked me in the eye and said, what did you say your name was again? You see, I didn't tell him my name. All of a sudden, he's asking. And I'll bet all of those more important people than me, doing more interesting work than me, are completely forgotten. And I know I'm not, because he called his admin over and he said, I want this guy to meet with Microsoft Research, because we've got quality problems, and I'd like them to help. I'd like him to meet with Brian Valentine and Jim Alchin and the powers that be at the time. And I need you, he said, to stay in Seattle for a few days if that's okay and fits with your schedule. I stayed in Seattle for a few days. I gave a talk at Jim Alchin's All Hands. I walked around the campus with Brian Valentine, Senior Vice President of Windows. And I got funding from MSR that none of those other people got. That's the power of a story. Right? You see, what everyone else was asking him to do is remember details. Here's a detail about me. Look how important I am. I didn't ask him to remember any detail. Instead, I gave him the concept of me. I gave him my story in a conceptual form. That's the thing you need to know about details. Do you all remember how to factor trinomials with negative fractional exponents. At one time, you could all do that because you've all passed 11th grade math. Those are details. You'll never remember those details. But if you understood the concept that they were trying to do, right? If you understood where the data came from that needed you to factor it as a trinomial with negative fractional input, you wouldn't forget it for the rest of your life. That's the problem with math education. We don't teach concepts. We only teach details. Details can't be remembered. Understand, if you give me a detail and I don't know where to file it in my brain, I'm going to forget it. I'm going to regurgitate it onto some exam form and then I'm going to flush it from memory. But if I give you the concept, aha, now that detail all of a sudden has context around it. Oh yes, that's a detail. I'll file it right there. There's another detail. I know where to file it. So when you're talking about your idea, focus on the concept of the idea, not on the details. And then finally, what I did here, the trick I played on Mr. Gates, was to get him to opt into the conversation. Say something interesting enough that all of a sudden he cared. And as soon as he said, "What was your name again?" I knew I had him. Because now, what's happening? When I ask you a question, I'm waiting for the answer. My mind is open to it. I'm ready for it. If I haven't asked you, I don't care. Understand what part of your story is the most interesting that your audience will opt in themselves. Once you've got that, you're done. Okay, another story. Now, as a Microsoftie, I get this question all the time. I used to work for Google. I got it all the time. You'd be giving this talk at a conference. You'd be talking about some cool new technology that our cloud is going to offer. It's going to be so badass, our customers are just going to fall on their knees and worship us. And then after that, instead of people saying, "Oh gosh, that's so cool, we can't wait," they ask this question. "But James, what about data privacy? But James, what about data privacy?" Like we care, right? I hate that question. Hate it. Hate it. And especially the tone of voice people assume when they ask it. It's never, "Oh, but James, what about privacy?" It's never like that. It's like, "But James, what about privacy?" Right? Blech. Okay, so if somebody's going to ask me this question, I'm going to show you how I answer it now, okay? Do you think you could do this? You willing to do it? But you got to sound like an asshole. Okay, can you do that? So when I go back there, I want you to say, "But James, what about privacy?" And I want you to sound like an asshole, okay? All right, here we go. All right, go ahead.
"But James, what about privacy?"
I'm not getting the asshole vibe. I'm just not getting. You think you can do it? All right, there's the question. You ready? Yes, sir. What's your question?
"Well, James, what about privacy, though?"
Ah, dude, he's got it. Everybody give the asshole a round of applause. Seriously, dude, well done, man. Just make him the winner. Otherwise, I think there'll be violence. Just make him the winner right now. All right, so go back here. Now, when you're giving a talk, just a little stage presence techniques. When you're giving a talk, you want to make eye contact with as many people as you can. You don't want to single someone out and stare at them. Let me know when this gets creepy, okay? Well, it's already creepy, isn't it? Right? Did you ever do that in college when you were like the first person in the semester to ask a question and all of a sudden every lecture is aimed right at you? You're like, "Oh, why did I ask a question? That was so stupid." So you can't do that. You can't make people feel uncomfortable. But when somebody has asked a question, they deserve a little bit more eye contact than otherwise. Because if he asks a question and I deliver the answer to you, it says, "I'm avoiding this. I'm avoiding this person because you sounded like you might be able to beat me up, and I don't, you know." So generally, the rule of thumb is try to get as many people involved because eye contact is intensely human. Eye contact and handshakes, right? That's what we do. That's what makes us different from all the other animals on the planet. But when somebody asks a question, they need to get a little bit more eye contact so that they know you're answering it. By the way, I teach a course here called The Art of Stage Presence, which is almost a full day long where I teach all these hand motions and movements. I'm already doing it some of you all. Getting the audience involved, getting the assholes involved. Right? And see now, he's already associated with this. All you all are going to remember him for the rest of the day, right? So anyhow, back to my question now. You just asked me, "James, what about privacy?" And start. So thank you for the privacy question. I knew I was going to get it. I always get the privacy question. And the way we ask that question, it sounds like we're treating privacy as this concept, this thing that we can define and that we can hold and that we can say that's private and that's not private. I don't think that that's the way privacy really works. I think instead, privacy is a spectrum. And at one end of the privacy spectrum is Santa Claus. And at the other end of the privacy spectrum is the NSA. Now, at the NSA end of the privacy spectrum, things are opaque. Things don't really make sense. We know they know something about us, but we don't know what it is. We know they're gathering information about us, but we don't know how. We know that they're using that information for something, but we don't know what they're using it for. So, at that end of the spectrum, there's kind of a lot of questions, no answers, and no real way to understand the value. Now, at the Santa Claus end of the spectrum, everything's sort of transparent, isn't it? We know what he knows. We write the dude a letter. Every year we write him a letter, wanting to stop. No one stop writing letters. We understand the contract with Santa, don't we? You notice how I'm pointing him out at several occasions? Right? You want to do this sort of thing. The Santa, particularly if he's an asshole, and you're talking about Santa Claus, he's already got it, right? He can't be an asshole around Santa. We sing the contract with Santa. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. Well, that's creepy, but oh, we're good with that because we know the value proposition. We're going to get toys. Worst case, we're going to get a lump of coal. Totally fine with that. So now, I think really the question isn't whether some event is or isn't creepy. It is whether or not, where our governments stand on this privacy spectrum, where the companies that we trust our data with are on this privacy spectrum, where we as individuals have tolerances on this privacy spectrum. In reality, privacy isn't a thing, it's a spectrum. And I think conversation about privacy through all society should include that. Okay, so stories made us human. What did you learn from that? That stories are told for an audience, not to an audience. Right? If I was speaking to you, I would be giving you facts and figures. Microsoft takes privacy very seriously. Microsoft has all of these rights. We have a reputation. We have this and we have that. And wouldn't go anywhere with you. Right? It sounds like corporate speak. But instead, I turned it into a story. I put a bad guy in the story, the NSA, and I put a good guy in the story, Santa Claus. It doesn't get much more bad and much more good. And what happens is you get lost in the story. Did you notice something about the way I answered that question? I didn't answer it. I didn't answer it. I completely avoided the question. You don't know how Microsoft treats it? And did you notice? I've given that answer hundreds and hundreds of times, and no one even notices that I failed to answer the question. No one, even the worst assholes in every audience I've ever had, not just people pretending to be assholes, but actual, real life, not playing it on TV assholes. They don't notice. They're like, oh, Santa Claus, NSA. So here's what I want you to do. When you have some concept to teach, I want you to think 4 versus 2. Are you preaching to the audience, or are you speaking for them? Have you considered how they're going to view this and how you can get that idea in your head? And if you keep that in mind, for an audience, not to an audience, you're going to be able to do this. Stories are better than lectures. Stories are better than feature lists. Don't tell me what your product can do. Tell me what your product can do for me. Ah, that's tweetable stuff right there. Totally tweetable stuff right there. Please include me if you tweet it. Okay, another story. So this is a story I used to tell. I used to teach software testing, except I didn't. I never taught people how to test software. And yet people credit me, even years after I stopped software testing completely and got into computer security. Oh yeah, James Whittaker taught me how to test software. Here's how I taught. So watch me tell this story about software testing. And then I'll show you the result of it at the end. So let me go back into storytelling mode and tell the story. Imagine for a minute that you all are all software testers, and this is a conference all about software testing, and you came to learn to test software. So here's my story. Okay, now this looks like a bug, doesn't it? It looks like a bug, I admit. That's a very weird route from southern Norway to northern Norway, but it's not a bug. It's not a bug. What it is proof that the world hates Norwegians. We do. We hate them. The whole world hates Norwegians. Look, let's just count their sins for a moment, shall we? They live on one of the most beautiful places on this planet, assholes. It's all sitting on one of the biggest oil reserves, most accessible oil reserves, assholes. They share all that profit with every single Norwegian. There are Norwegian fetuses wealthier than anyone in this room. Their men live longer. Their women are more beautiful. Are you kidding me? Of course, when they want to go from one place in their country to another, we send them through Newcastle so they can see how the rest of us live. How about a little tour through the slums of northern, how about a little East Berlin for them? Not a bug. Now, this is a bug. Come on, you're software testers. Do you see the bug? Hey, if you can't see a bug, you can't really call yourself a software tester, can you? Let me point it out. Arlington National Cemetery. Google has classified it as a restaurant. A restaurant! What are they serving there? Catch of the day, cadaver, just like yesterday. That is a bug. Here's another one. Microsoft wrote this one back in Y2K days. Bask in the power of Redmond, Washington. Bask in just what those people can do. They can create time. Check it out. February 29th of 2001, that day doesn't exist unless you're Microsoft. So Microsoft, you most powerful company in the world, you have the ability to create time. I have a suggestion about what you can do with it. How about you stop and fix some of your bugs? We could all use higher quality software. Okay, this is a slow unroll. An error has occurred. Okay, seems kind of obvious, but it ain't over. An error has occurred while displaying the error that has occurred. Yes, it's funny, but it still ain't over. While creating an error report, a human being typed this into Visual Studio. And then another human being doing a code review read it and said, well, you're creating an error report, and error occurred. Yeah, looks good to me. No, it doesn't look good to you. I actually got T-shirts printed with this on it around Microsoft campus back when we first founded in 2006. That's a bug. Now, do you see what I've done? I haven't taught anybody I haven't gone through the process of finding any of these bugs. That's what most people would do when they're presenting this. They say, okay, here's a bunch of things I'm going to do, and then bam, there's the bug. Here's how I found it. I never did that, not once. Because when you do that, you're telling people how to do something. Showing them is far more powerful. Show, don't tell. Don't tell me why your idea is important. Show me. Don't tell me what your product does. Show me. Because show, I'm going to remember forever. Tell, not so much. Tell is an authority position. Look, I'm smarter than you. I've been doing this longer than you. Let me tell you how to do your job. Doesn't feel good, does it? And if you make your audience feel stupid, if you make your audience feel like they're lower than you, they are going to stop listening, and they're basically going to say, you know what, that guy, she's just like him over there. So don't do that. By showing them, they figure it out for themselves, and all of a sudden, they have this aha moment inside their head. If you are trying to describe your product, and you cause somebody in your audience to have that aha moment, by the way, who's going to win tomorrow? The people who are going to win tomorrow are going to be the ones that create that aha moment in the heads of their judges. When you create that, what did you do? Instead of denigrating you and telling you how much better I am than you, I made you feel smart instead by showing you. Oh, wow, I just figured something out. Look, human beings, what we do, we think. It's our consciousness that makes us different than all of the other lower species. And if you can tap into that, if you can make someone think, if you can teach somebody something, there's no greater favor that one human can do another human than to teach them something, to to make them smarter, to make them more human. And you do that better by showing and not telling. So here's what happens. The neuroscience behind this is actually pretty interesting, because I get these emails all the time. Right, this came just last year. I haven't done, so I actually gave a talk called Test is Dead, trying to disassociate myself with this industry. And yet, here is somebody at a testing conference saying, hey, James, they're still talking about you. There's still people saying, oh, yeah, James taught me everything I know about software testing. I never taught software testing. That's how powerful it is. So what's happening? What's happening inside the mind? This is something that a neuroscientist called neural coupling. And it turns out they did a really cool experiment. They hooked up a storyteller to a brain scan and had her tell a story and recorded her voice. And so during the recording, they understood the brain activity that was happening in her head. And then they had a bunch of people listen, also attached to the same brain scanning equipment. And what did they find? They found that the neural activity in my brain as a storyteller is transmitted to you as a story listener. So in other words, I get to decide which part of your brain activates, which of your neural connections fire. Neural coupling. Right now, the same parts of your brain are active in my brain. And I can do more, too. Getting into the art of stage presence. I'm not going to talk too much about this because it takes too long. But you can cause it by changing your voice. If I lower my voice, did you feel it? Did you feel the sound go down in the room? If you were typing on your computer, you stopped right there. Because I lower my voice in a very important manner. Your brain also senses that. Oh my God. Your ears, I got to listen more because whispering, oh my gosh. Right, because when I whisper to you, that's gossip, that's a secret, that's something that just between me and you get that feeling in your head. And if I'm able to have an emotional reaction, sometimes I tell a story about my son in this. And my son is not normal. He's wonderful. And when I see, even now, I can't tell that story. Did you feel it? Did you feel my pain? Did you feel my emotional pain? That's called neural coupling. And it's really powerful. Our brains are not these disconnected things. Something's going on between me and you. We don't know how it happens. One of these days we're going to figure it out, and we will be able to read each other's minds or transmit via thought, right? It's perfectly scientifically possible, but until then, you can use it to get inside the mind of your audience when you tell them a story. And it's very powerful. It's called neural coupling. Okay, so I missed one story in here because I didn't have the full 75 minutes I need, and it's too bad, too, because it's a story about Brad Pitt and zombies. I mean, come on. Seriously? Was that the most perfect movie ever? It's not like a zombie movie. It would have been good enough with just zombies, right? And you add Brad Pitt, holy shit. But I didn't get to that one because I don't have the time. But now I want to give you all homework. You see, going through life, especially if you're of young, tender age, you need to have a story. One of these days, something is going to happen. One of these days, someone important is going to walk past you in a hallway. And you're going to go, oh my gosh, it's somebody important, somebody who can help my career. And you're going to walk by, they're going to say hi, you're going to say hi. And then you're going to go home that night, and you're going to say, oh, I had my chance. What did I say? Probably something stupid, right? Well, I had my chance. Or one of these days, somebody's going to come along and say, hey, what's your idea? I'd like to fund your idea. And you're going to say, well, it's this app that, and all of a sudden he's already decided 10 seconds into it, you're never going to get any of his venture capital. Do you have a story ready? A story for you and a story for your ideas. I want two stories. If you can embed them into one, it's that much more powerful. Two stories. One about yourself, and one about your product that you do. Microsoft's corporate mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So when people ask me, James, what's your story? I'm a storyteller. I empower Microsoft to achieve more. And when Satya Nadella heard that, he took me off my job and said, okay, go around and actually do that. I want you to do that. I want every employee at Microsoft to feel the power. That's how powerful a story can be. So what's your story? Spend some time thinking about it. Now, let me tell you one last story to end this with, because this happened to me. Right? The same situation I was describing with you. One day, an important person came into my life, and I made a difference in his, and it made my career, really. So there I was, Google employee, and I was in the men's room, doing what Google employees do, right? I was using, right? There I was, totally empty bathroom, just me. I'm kind of lost in my thought, doing what I do. And I hear the door open, right? So I'm like, oh, don't. Guys, I'm sorry, I'm breaking a guy code, aren't I? What happens? And I feel this presence walking up, and he occupies the urinal right next to me. See, the guys are laughing. He broke the man code. Come on, there's a whole, do you know there's an app to teach little boys which urinal to use? And it's more complicated than it sounds. See, we've got this hardwired into our man brains, right? What you do is two things, right? You go, you pick the spot with the most space, and you pick the spot that gives the next person the most space too, right? This is the rule. This is the rule. We built apps to teach little boys this rule. This guy just broke the rule. It's all empty. Why there? And so I had to look to see who this monster was that's breaking the rule, and that's what had happened. That monster was Larry Page, the CEO of Google. To make matters worse, he decided to look at me at the same moment I looked at him, and we made eye contact. You don't want to make eye contact when you got your junk in your hand. You just don't want it. And there was this really awkward moment, and he said, "Hi, what do you do here?" And I'm thinking, well, 6 or 8 times a day, you can find me pretty much in this general area creating space. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I looked back, right in the eye, and told Larry Page my story. I looked at him and I said, "I've been saving the world from Internet Explorer since 2009. And there was a pause. He went back to his business. I went back to mine. And about 20 seconds later, he said, you work for Chrome?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I'm the development director in Seattle and Kirkland. I have 80 engineers. We build the V8 engine and the security modules and the UI for Chrome." "Oh, you took a picture of me doing this." Can you put not actual size on there? So some things are not tweetable. And then we went over, we washed our hands, and he looks at me, and for the second time in my career, a CEO said the same thing. "What did you say your name was again?" I didn't tell him my name. All of a sudden, he opted in too. And I said, "Larry, my name is James Whittaker, and I run the Seattle Kirkland office. You're welcome anytime to come up and visit us." A week later, he didn't really go out of his way. He got his own jet and flew up. He visited the office for the first time in 2 years. And I know I impacted him because 2 days later, I get a phone call. A phone call. Microsoft, we don't call each other. My phone hadn't rung in years. A phone call from a colleague up here in another group. And I answer, and I'm like, "Linus? What's the matter? Text isn't working? Google Plus? What's going on?" And he's like, dude, seriously. "Were you peeing with Larry Page?" And I said, "Yeah, actually we had a moment." He said, "I know you had a moment." He said, "Stop peeing with Larry Page, James. He's going around asking us all for our stories. We don't have any stories, James. You're making us look bad." And so hashtag Stop Peeing with Larry trended on internal Google Plus for weeks after that. And that's how you become known. You become known not really for who you are, not really for the ideas you have, but the quality of the story that presents who you are, the quality of the story that presents your ideas. That's what I want you to take away. You guys need to have stories. So if you enjoyed this, follow me on Twitter. Read my blog at medium.com. I've got 2 storytelling lessons on there. The first is the Storytelling Manifesto, which I talk about some of the brain science behind storytelling. And then I got challenged. Somebody said, oh, you're cheating, James. You wrote a manifesto about storytelling. I think if storytelling is really that powerful, why don't you write a story to talk about the power of stories? And so I did. I wrote the Parable of Eros. Eros is a story spelled backwards about a man who knew how to tell stories and knew how to change the world with those stories. My name is James Whittaker. I work for Microsoft. Peace.